Let's bring in the new PC leader, Jason Kenney. He's in our Edmonton studio. All right, Mr. Kenney, congratulations on the win, but now there's this bizarre twist of having to kill the PC party. What happened in your talks yesterday, and what happens next?
Well, I don't accept your characterization. I call this a new start or a fresh beginning. After all, almost all the Wild Rosers, Don, are former progressive conservatives. They just got upset with the direction of things in the past decade. Really, I'm proposing that we just reunite the family, bringing back the coalition that existed under Ralph Klein and Peter Lougheed that gave pretty good government to Alberta for 4 decades. Really, I call it a provincial version of the Conservative Party of Canada or an Alberta version of the Saskatchewan Party or the BC Liberal Party. So I was very humbled with the big mandate received last Saturday and moved straight to my first meeting with Brian on yesterday afternoon. We had a really good chat, agreed on everything we discussed, and focused on an agreement to put together a discussion committee by the end of this week with a mandate to come up with a unity agreement for the two parties by the end of April. And we also discussed, he and I are both optimistic we can get that done in a few weeks. And then we would send it to the grassroots members of both parties for their ratification, followed by setting up the new party in a leadership election. So far, things are going in a very positive direction. I'm very optimistic.
For our viewers outside of Alberta, is there much of a gap between the parties in terms of policy? I mean, the PCs were seen as progressive, the Wild Rose a little harder right. Is that no longer the case?
Well, I don't think it is the case. The two parties are voting identically in the legislature on 90% of the time. The other 10% are not big issues. They're voting for each other's amendments 100% of the time. There is no major issue in Alberta politics today on which they disagree. The Wild Rose Party really was people breaking away from the PC party for a number of reasons. One, people in the energy sector got ticked off with a royalty review. A lot of people in the agricultural sector got upset with some bills that were seen as compromising property rights. A lot of fiscal conservatives got upset with what they saw as fiscal mismanagement in recent years of PC governments, and others just got upset with the tone of entitlement and arrogance from recent PC governments. But I think I'll say to you as the PC leader, I think progressive conservatives have learned from the mistakes of the recent past, and I think Wild Roses have made their point. So there is no reason for this division to continue in the future if we don't want it to.
Does it complicate things knowing the man you're negotiating with essentially wants the same job you do? Like, there's two of you fighting to become the one leader of this. Does that create tension and hostility?
Well, it certainly didn't in our first meeting. Both Brian and I agreed to put all that stuff to the side. Let's focus on trying to come to a unity agreement that can pass the judgment of the grassroots members of both parties. I've said from day one, Don, that the only way this whole thing will work is if folks like us are prepared to park our egos, and if all of us are willing to park our brands and labels and the resentments that have accumulated over a decade of division. I'll tell you this, I hope that when we get a united party, there will be a lot of talented Albertans putting themselves forward for its leadership. And if someone else is elected leader, they would have my total support. So let's park the egos, let's get the deal done and encourage the members to ratify it.
Here's a trick question for you. What do you think former Premier Ralph Klein would think if he knew that confrontational tax fighter who forced him to kill the MLA pension plan in 1993 is now the leader of his party?
I think Ralph would be very happy with what we're doing. In fact, I quoted Ralph at length in my speech at the convention on Saturday. Don, you'll remember that he gave the keynote address to the United Alternative Conference, which paved the way for the federal merger back about 17 years ago. And he said, my Alberta PC party has federal reformers, federal PCs, a couple liberals, and a lot of people who don't have a federal affiliation, but we're a big tent party. We make it work. He said, I think you folks at this convention shouldn't be arguing over history, but you should be making history. I am referring to Ralph as the template for the kind of unity we're trying to recreate. And you know, Don, very well, because you're an expert in Alberta politics, that a lot of the Ralph Klein PCs left to join the Wild Rose. I mean, like Marv Moore, elected with Peter Lougheed in 1971, chaired all of Ralph's successful election campaigns, left to go to the Wild Rose because he was disenchanted. He's come back to support my campaign to get this done. So this is a reconstitution of of Ralph's coalition in many ways.
All right. Nice trip down memory lane there. Jason Kenney, thanks for joining us. Congratulations again.
And by the way, people should go out and buy Don Martin's King Ralph in the Remainders section of bookstores. Great biography.
I don't know if you can find it anywhere. All right. Thank you for joining us. Let's